The History of Herodotus, Volume 1. Book 1. The first book of the Histories, called Clio. This is the showing forth of the inquiry of Herodotus of Halicarnassos, to the end that neither the deeds of men may be forgotten by lapse of time, nor the works great and marvelous, which have been produced, some by Hellenes and some by barbarians, some by Hellenes and some by barbarians, may lose their renown, and especially that the causes may be remembered for which these waged war with one another. Those of the Persians who have knowledge of history declare that the Phoenicians first began the quarrel. These, they say, came from that which is called the Erythraean Sea to this of ours, and having settled in the land where they continue even now to dwell, set themselves forthwith to make long voyages by sea, and conveying merchandise of Egypt and of Assyria, they arrived at other places, and also at Argos. Now Argos was at that time in all points the first of the states within that land which is now called Hellas. The Phoenicians arrived then at this land of Argos, and began to dispose of their ship's cargo, and on the 5th or 6th day after they had arrived, when their goods had been almost all sold, there came down to the sea a great company of women, and among them the daughter of the king, and her name, as the Hellenes also agree, was Io, the daughter of Inachos. These, standing near to the stern of the ship, were buying of the wares such as pleased them most, when of a sudden the Phoenicians, passing the word from one to another, made a rush upon them, and the greater part of the women escaped by flight, but Io and certain others were carried off. So they put them on board their ship, and forthwith departed, sailing away to Egypt. In this manner the Persians report that Io came to Egypt, not agreeing therein with the Hellenes, and this, they say, was the first beginning of wrongs. Then after this, they say, certain Hellenes, but the name of the people they are not able to report, put into the city of Tyre in Phoenicia, and carried off the king's daughter Europa. These would doubtless be Cretans, and so they were quits for the former injury. After this, however, the Hellenes, they say, were the authors of the second wrong, for they sailed into Aia of Colchis, and to the river Phasis with a ship of war, and from thence, after they had done the other business for which they came, they carried off the king's daughter Medea, and the king of Colchis sent a herald to the land of Hellas, and demanded satisfaction for the rape, and to have his daughter back. But they answered that, as the barbarians had given them no satisfaction for the rape of Io the Argive, so neither would they give satisfaction to the barbarians for this. In the next generation after this, they say, Alexander the son of Priam, having heard of these things, desired to get a wife for himself by violence from Hellas, being fully assured that he would not be compelled to give any satisfaction for this wrong, inasmuch as the Hellenes gave none for theirs. So he carried off Helen, and the Hellenes resolved to send messengers first, and to demand her back with satisfaction for the rape. And when they put forth this demand, the others alleged to them the rape of Medea, saying that the Hellenes were now desiring satisfaction to be given to them by others, though they had given none themselves, nor had surrendered the person when demand was made. Up to this point, they say, nothing more happened than the carrying away of women on both sides. But after this, the Hellenes were very greatly to blame, for they set the first example of war, making an expedition into Asia before the barbarians made any into Europe. Now they say that in their judgment, though it is an act of wrong to carry away women by force, it is a folly to set one's heart on taking vengeance for their rape. And the wise course is to pay no regard when they have been carried away, for it is evident that they would never be carried away if they were not themselves willing to go. And the Persians say that they, namely the people of Asia, when their women were carried away by force, had made it a matter of no account, but the Hellenes, on account of a woman of Lacedaemon, gathered together a great armament, and then came to Asia and destroyed the dominion of Priam, and that from this time forward they had always considered the Hellenic race to be their enemy. For Asia and the barbarian races which dwell there the Persians claim as belonging to them, but Europe and the Hellenic race they consider to be parted off from them. The Persians, for their part, say that things happened thus, and they conclude that the beginning of their quarrel with the Hellenes was on account of the taking of Ilion. But as regards Io, the Phoenicians do not agree with the Persians in telling the tale thus, for they deny that they carried her off to Egypt by violent means, and they say on the other hand that when they were in Argos she was intimate with the master of their ship, and perceiving that she was with child, she was ashamed to confess it to her parents, and therefore sailed away with the Phoenicians of her own will for fear of being found out. These are the tales told by the Persians and the Phoenicians severally. And concerning these things, I am not going to say that they happened thus or thus. But when I have pointed to the man who first within my own knowledge began to commit wrong against the Hellenes, I shall go forward further with the story, giving an account of the cities of men, small as well as great, for those which in old times were great have for the most part become small, while those that were in my own time great used in former times to be small. So then, since I know that human prosperity never continues steadfast, I shall make mention of both indifferently. Croesus was Lydian by race, the son of Elytus, and ruler of the nations which dwell on this side of the river Halys, which river flowing from the south between the Syrians and the Paphlagonians runs out toward the north wind into that sea which is called the Euxine. This Croesus, first of all the barbarians of whom we have knowledge, subdued certain of the Hellenes and forced them to pay tribute, while others he gained over and made them his friends. Those whom he subdued were the Ionians, the Aeolians, and the Dorians who dwell in Asia. And those whom he made his friends were the Lacedaemonians. But before the reign of Croesus, all the Hellenes were free, for the expedition of the Cimmerians, which came upon Ionia before the time of Croesus, was not a conquest of the cities, but a plundering incursion only. Now the supremacy which had belonged to the Heraclidae came to the family of Croesus. Heraclidae. Came to the family Croesus, called Myrmidai, in the following manner. Candales, whom the Hellenes call Myrsilos, was ruler of Sardis, and the descendant of Alcaeus, son of Heracles, for Agron, the son of Ninos, the son of Belos, the son of Alcaeus, was the first of the Heraclidae, who became king of Sardis, and Candales, the son of Myrsos, was the last. But those who were kings over this land before Agron were descendants of Lydos, the son of Attais, whence this whole nation was called Lydian, having been before called Meonian. From these the Heraclidae descended from Heracles, and the slave girl of Iardanos obtained the government, being charged with it by reason of an oracle. And they reigned for 22 generations of men, 505 years, handing on the power from father to son to the time of Clondales, the son of Myrsos. This Candales, then of whom I speak, had become passionately in love with his own wife. And having become so, he deemed that his wife was fairer by far than all other women, and thus deeming to Gyges, the son of Dascalos, for he of all his spearmen was the most pleasing to him. To this Gyges, I say, he used to impart as well the more weighty of his affairs as also the beauty of his wife, praising it above measure. And after no long time, since it was destined that evil should happen to Candales, he said to Gyges as follows: Gyges, I think that thou dost not believe me when I tell thee of the beauty of my wife, for it happens that men's ears are less apt of belief than their eyes. Contrive therefore means by which thou mayest look upon her naked. But he cried aloud and said, Master, what word of unwisdom is this which thou dost utter, bidding me to look upon my mistress naked? When a woman puts off her tunic, she puts off her modesty also. Moreover, of old time, those fair sayings have been found out by men, from which we ought to learn wisdom. And of these one is this, that each man should look on his own. But I believe indeed that she is of all women the fairest, and I entreat thee not to ask of me that which it is not lawful for me to do. With such words as these he resisted, fearing lest some evil might come to him from this. But the king answered him thus: Be of good courage, Gyges, and have no fear, either of me, that I am saying these words to try thee, or of my wife, lest any harm may happen to thee from her. For I will contrive it so from the first that she shall not even perceive that she has been seen by thee. I will place thee in the room where we sleep, behind the open door, and after I have gone in, my wife also will come to lie down. Now there is a seat near the entrance of the room, and upon this she will lay her garments as she takes them off one by one, and so thou wilt be able to gaze upon her at full leisure. And when she goes from the chair to the bed, and thou shalt be behind her back, then let it be thy part to take care that she sees thee not as thou goest through the door. He then, since he might not avoid it, gave consent, and Candaules, when he considered that it was time to rest, led Gyges to the chamber, and straightway after this the woman also appeared. And Gyges looked upon her after she came in, and as she laid down her garments, and when she had her back turned towards him as she went to bed, then he slipped away from his hiding place and was going forth. And as he went out, the woman caught sight of him, and perceiving that which had been done by her husband, she did not cry out, though struck with shame. But she made as though she had not perceived the matter, meaning to avenge herself upon Candaules. For among the Lydians, as also among most other barbarians, it is a shame even for a man to be seen naked. At the time, then she kept silence, as I say, and made no outward sign. But as soon as day had dawned, and she had ready those of the servants whom she perceived to be the most attached to herself, and after that she sent to summon Gyges. He then, not supposing that anything of that which had been done was known to her, came upon her summons, for he had been accustomed before to go whenever the queen summoned him. And when Gyges was come, the woman said to him these words: There are now two ways open to thee, Gyges, and I give thee the choice which of the two thou wilt prefer to take. Either thou must slay Candaules and possess both me and the kingdom of Lydia, or thou must thyself here on the spot be slain, so that thou mayest not in future, by obeying Candaules in all things, see that which thou shouldest not. Either he must die who formed this design, or thou who hast looked upon me naked, and done that which is not accounted lawful. For a time when then Gyges was amazed at these words, and afterwards he began to entreat her that she would not bind him by necessity to make such a choice. Then, however, as he could not prevail with her, but saw that necessity was in truth set before him, either to slay his master or to be himself slain by others, he made the choice to live himself, and he inquired further as follows: Since thou dost compel me to take my master's life against my own will, let me hear from thee also what is the manner in which we shall lay hands upon him. And she answering said, From that same place shall the attempt be, where he displayed me naked, and we will lay hands upon him as he sleeps. So after they had prepared the plot, when night came on, for Gyges was not let go, nor was there any way of escape for him, but he must either be slain himself or slay Candaules. He followed the woman to the bedchamber, and she gave him a dagger and concealed him behind that very same door. Then afterwards, while Candaules was sleeping, Gyges came privily up to him, and slew him, and he obtained both his wife and his kingdom. Of him, moreover, Archilochus the Perean, who lived about that time, made mention in a trimeter iambic verse. He obtained the kingdom, however, and was strengthened in it by means of the oracle at Delphi. For when the Lydians were angry because of the fate of Candaules, and had risen in arms, a treaty was made between the followers of Gyges and the other Lydians to this effect, that if the oracle should give answer that he was to be king of the Lydians, he should be king, and if not, he should give back the power of the son of Heracles. So the oracle gave answer, and Gyges accordingly became king. Yet the Pythian prophetess said this also, that vengeance for the Heraclidae should come upon the descendants of Gyges in the 5th generation. Of this oracle the Lydians and their kings made no account until it was in fact fulfilled. Thus the Myrmidai obtained the government, having driven out from it the Heraclidae, and Gyges, when he became ruler, sent votive offerings to Delphi, not a few. For of all the silver offerings at Delphi, this are more in number than those of any other man, and besides the silver he offered a vast quantity of gold, and especially one offering which is more worthy of mention than the rest, namely 6 golden mixing bowls, which are dedicated there as his gift. Of these the weight is 30 talents, and they stand in the treasury of the Corinthians, though in truth this treasury does not belong to the state of the Corinthians, but is that of Kypsilos, the son of Aetion. This Gyges was the first of the barbarians within our knowledge who dedicated votive offerings at Delphi, except only Midas, the son of Gordius, king of Phrygia, who dedicated for an offering the royal throne on which he sat before all to decide causes. And this throne, a sight worth seeing, stands in the same place with the bowls of Gyges. This gold and silver which Gyges dedicated is called Gygian by the people of Delphi, after the name of him who offered it. Now Gyges also, as soon as he became king, led an army against Miletus and Smyrna, and he took the lower town of Colophon. But no other great deed did he do in his reign, which lasted 38 years. Therefore he will pass him by with no more mention than he has already been made. And I will speak now of Artus, the son of Gyges, who became king after Gyges. He took Priene and made an invasion against Miletus, and while he was ruling over Sardis, the Cimmerians, driven from their abodes by the nomad Scythians, came to Asia and took Sardis except the citadel. Now when Artus had become king for 49 years, Sadiates, his son, succeeded to his kingdom and reigned 12 years, and after him Aliadas, this last made war against Cyaxares, the descendant of Diox, and against the Medes, and he drove the Cimmerians forth out of Asia. And he took Smyrna, which had been founded from Colophon, and made an invasion against Clazomenae. From this he returned, not as he desired, but with great loss during his reign. However, he performed other deeds very worthy of mention as follows. He made war with those of Miletus, having received this war as an inheritance from his father, for he used to invade their land and besiege Miletus in the following manner. Whenever there were ripe crops upon the land, then he led an army into their confines, making his march to the sound of pipes and harps and flutes, both of male and female tone. And when he came to the Milesian land, he neither pulled down the houses that were in the fields, nor set fire to them, nor tore off their doors, but let them stand as they were. The trees, however, and the crops that were upon the land he destroyed, and then departed by the way he came. For the men of Miletus had command of the sea, so that it was of no use for his army to blockade them. And he abstained from pulling down the houses to the end, that Milesians might have places to dwell in while they sowed and tilled the land. And by the means of their labor he might have somewhat to destroy when he made his invasion. Thus he continued to war with them for 11 years, and in the course of these years the Milesians suffered 2 great defeats. Once when they fought a battle in the district of Lemenion, in their own land, and again in the plain of Meander. Now for 6 of the 11 years Sadiates, the son of Artus, was still ruler of the Lydians, and the same who was wont to invade the land of Miletus at the times mentioned. For this Sadiates was he who first began the war, but for the 5 years which followed these first 6 the war was carried on by Elidas, the son of Herodotus, who received it as an inheritance from his father, as I have already said, and applied himself to it earnestly. And none of the Ionians helped those of Miletus bear the burden of this war, except only the men of Chios. This came to their aid to pay back like with like, for the Milesians had formerly assisted the Chians throughout their war with the people of Erythrae. Then, in the 12th year of the war, when standing corn was being burnt by the army of the Lydians, it happened as follows. As soon as the corn was kindled, it was driven by a violent wind and set fire to the temple of Athene, surnamed of Asessos, and the temple began set on fire, was burnt down to the ground. Of this no account was made then, but afterwards, when the army had returned to Sardis, Aliatus fell sick, and as his sickness lasted long, he sent messengers to inquire of the oracle at Delphi, either being advised to do so by someone, or because he himself thought it best to send and inquire of the god concerning his sickness. But when these arrived at Delphi, the Pythian prophetess said that she would give them no answer until they should have built up again the temple of Athene, which they had burnt at Asessos in the land of Miletus. Thus much I know by the report of the people of Delphi, but the Milesians add to this that Periander, the son of Kypselos, being a special guest friend of Thraspelos, the then despot of Miletus, heard of the oracle which had been given to Aliatus, and sending a messenger told Thrasbulos in order that he might have knowledge of it beforehand and take much counsel as the case required. This is the story told by the Milesians. And Aliatus, when this answer was reported to him, sent a herald forthwith to Miletus, desiring to make a truce with Thrasbulos and the Milesians for so long a time as he should be building the temple. He then was being sent as envoy to Miletus, and Thrasbulos, in the meantime, being informed beforehand of the whole matter, and knowing what Aliatus was meaning to do, contrived this device. He gathered together in the marketplace all the store of provisions which was found in the city, both his own and that which belonged to private persons. And he proclaimed to the Milesians that on a signal given by him they should all begin to drink and make merry with one another. This Thrasbulos did, and thus proclaimed to the inn that the herald from Sardis, seeing a vast quantity of provisions carelessly piled up, and the people feasting, might report this for Aliatus.